I knew something was off the moment I stepped into the conference room on the 17th floor. The curtains were drawn and the cold overhead lighting cast a sterile glow over the expressionless faces of the three people I had worked with for decades. A cardboard box had been placed next to the chair. On the table, a bright tablet sat in front of Lisa, its screen reflecting the iciness in her eyes. "Due to organizational restructuring," she said, each word delivered as if rehearsed in a mirror. "We're terminating your position at Eastwell Industries, effective immediately." No eye contact, no gratitude, 19 years of service reduced to a few lines of prepared text. I didn't ask why, I didn't argue, I didn't plead. I simply nodded. The man beside her, Darren, the head of HR, who once invited me to his daughter's birthday party, slid the box toward me like I was a stranger who had wandered in off the street. "We'll need your ID badge and parking pass. Security will escort you to collect your belongings." I stood, adjusted my tie. In my left hand was a worn leather briefcase, my late wife's last gift before cancer took her 7 years ago. I had carried it every day like clockwork. Today, it was the only armor I had left between myself and the calculated ending they had scripted. "Grayson," Lisa said, using my name for the first time that morning, "don't you have anything to say? I mean, about everything we've shared?" Her tone hinted she expected me to break, perhaps to make her feel better about what she had done. I replied simply, "Thank you for the opportunity." The answer made her flinch. I walked out without looking back. Kyle, the youngest security guard at the company, had been assigned to walk me out. He looked uncomfortable, fumbling with his hands like he was escorting a relative. "I'm sorry, Mr. Grayson. I don't know what's going on." "It's not your fault," I said, still gripping the briefcase. Inside was a compact black USB drive holding 3 years of quietly compiled evidence. Each questionable transaction, every shady contract, every last-minute audit cancellation. Meticulously documented, just like how I'd always run the company books. Lisa and Darren thought they had eliminated an old-school nuisance, a thorn in the side of their shadow budgets. They had no idea I'd started suspecting the moment she misplaced those vendor verification files. Or when Darren dismissed the senior accounting assistant with no explanation. I passed colleagues who once invited me out for coffee. Now they stared at their screens or pretended to read something on their phones. No one met my eyes. At the elevator, I let out a faint chuckle. They thought I was walking away empty-handed, but I wasn't. I was leaving with the one thing they feared most: the truth. 19 years ago, I joined Eastwell Industries when it was still a family-run business. Back then, old Mr. Walter Eastwell would personally inspect control panels on the shop floor each morning before his first cup of coffee. "Numbers don't lie, Grayson. People do," he once told me. He passed away 4 years ago. The company changed hands. A new structure, new leadership, but the old values vanished. I tried to look the other way, told myself I was being too rigid, until the warning signs became as visible as bloodstains on a balance sheet. The box Kyle handed me felt heavy, but not nearly as burdensome as what I was carrying in my mind. What was growing inside me wasn't rage. It was clarity, the chilling calm of a man who'd stepped out of the shadows and finally saw who was under the lights and who was flipping the switch behind the curtain. I stepped into the parking lot. The March wind rustled the trees. I caught the smell of oil and dust in the air. For the first time in nearly 2 decades, I had no morning meeting, no expense reports to review, no payroll to sign off on. Just me, an old leather briefcase, and a plan that started that day. When I first walked into Eastwell, I still had the discipline of a soldier fresh from the field. Loyalty, structure, no questions asked. I believed if I worked hard and kept the numbers clean, effort and honesty would always be rewarded. For over a decade, that held true. Back then, Walter Eastwell still ran the company. He wasn't the kind of leader who sat behind a polished desk firing off emails. Each morning, he walked through the factory before anyone else, inspecting machines and chatting with technicians. "Let the numbers speak," he told me during my first quarterly report. "If they don't make sense, find out why. But never let them become tools for deception." I took it to heart. From then on, I lived by that principle in every balance sheet I touched. But everything started to shift in year 13. Walter retired for health reasons, and the board sold the company to a group of investors from Chicago. At first, they didn't interfere much. They even kept the old leadership in place. I thought maybe things would remain steady. I was wrong. The shift came not in a bang, but like a small crack in a windshield, barely visible at first, then spreading like a spider web. My first red flag was a set of invoices from Vermont Logistics, a freight intermediary we'd never used. It wasn't the name that stood out. It was the fact that their charges had nearly doubled month over month, while the volume of goods remained the same. I asked the warehouse manager, and he replied vaguely, maybe they're splitting shipments to be more flexible. I double-checked the tracking numbers. Some didn't exist. Others were duplicated. Several payments had gone out before goods were even received. I emailed logistics asking for clarification. No one responded. Then came the consulting fees. They began popping up in the quarterly budget reports. Tens of thousands of dollars, sent to impressive-sounding firms like Horizon Strategy Group and Orion Enterprise Solutions. But when I looked up their tax IDs and addresses, I found nothing. Some locations were vacant buildings. One was a laundromat. I started feeling short of breath every time I opened Excel. These weren't just numbers anymore. They were camouflage. Precise, deliberate, and crafted to hide something much larger. If I kept asking questions, I'd be marked. So I pivoted. I began documenting quietly. I made backups. I archived every report I had access to. I created a parallel system, one untouched by executive directives. My backups were kept in 3 separate places: a physical copy at home, an encrypted external drive, and a final version synced to a private cloud account under an alias. My military training in secure data handling was finally useful again. One day, I overheard Darren, fresh from Porter Ames Financial, whisper to Lisa in the hallway, "I've cleared the way, just start pushing the budget down. Grayson's too old school to trace anything. He's stuck in the notebook era." They didn't know I was around the corner by the print room. I heard every word. That was the day I stopped waiting. No one else was going to protect what Walter had built. I started examining every expense, every audit that got mysteriously canceled. Each time I uncovered something off, it didn't scare me. It just broke something inside. I used to believe if I kept the ledgers clean, the company would stay on course. What I didn't expect was that the ones steering the ship were the ones drilling holes in the hull. I couldn't tell Ellie, my daughter, any of it. She'd just made partner at a prestigious law firm in Seattle. I didn't want to burden her. Every time she asked, "You okay, Dad?" I'd just smile and say, "Busy season. Lots of numbers to double-check." The truth? I was living a double life. By day, I sat in meetings, signed off reports, acted the loyal employee, but by night, I became something else. Someone tracing the veins of corruption, quietly piecing together the anatomy of decay. I didn't know yet what I'd do with everything I'd gathered. I just knew if I ever had to leave, I wouldn't be leaving empty-handed. The first signs didn't come with loud alarms. They came through silence. Longer elevator rides, fewer lunch invites, eyes that used to meet mine now turning away. The people I'd worked alongside for years, Russell in maintenance, Martha in internal audit, Jared from analytics, started retiring early, each after quiet meetings with Darren and Lisa. At Martha's farewell coffee across the street, I asked her directly, "You really wanted to leave?" She looked down, voice low. "Grayson, ask too much, and they think you're disloyal. At our age, who has the strength to fight?" She didn't need to say more. I understood. Those who remained, especially the new hires, shared a pattern. Young, smooth-talking, but mostly inexperienced. Some I recognized from Lisa's networking events. One of them, Ethan, was appointed financial optimization specialist with full access to internal reports. When I checked his background, I found vague descriptions and a recommendation email from Darren. No clear financial credentials, no verifiable work history. I began logging people, too. A separate file, portraits, job titles, how they appeared overnight like pieces moved into place. Then Jacob, head of logistics, came to my office one afternoon. visibly tense. Grayson, they just asked me to sign a stack of receipts for shipments that don't exist. They're calling it inventory reconciliation through new accounting methodology. I refused. 3 days later, I was reassigned to the Idaho branch. Effective immediately, I gripped my chair. Did you keep any copies? He nodded and silently placed a small USB on my desk. I won't be here much longer, but you still are. Be careful. 3 days later, he was gone. His company email bounced back with a no longer active message. I didn't need more confirmation. Eastwell was no longer Eastwell. It was a corpse of a company wearing a mask of inflated profits and compliance puppets. Each day, I felt more like a stranger in the very building I helped shape from the ground up. The people who once shared morning coffee with me now avoided eye contact like I was radioactive. Even my former assistant, Michelle, was quietly replaced. No goodbye, no note. One morning, her name vanished from the directory, replaced by a younger woman named Hannah. Polite, professional, and completely incurious. One late afternoon, I came home earlier than usual. Ellie was at the dining table, papers spread out around her. She looked up and with a furrowed brow asked, "Dad, you seem tired lately. Is everything okay?" I froze. Ellie rarely noticed little things. Her work schedule was so packed she had to plan dinner a week in advance. I sat down and poured myself a cup of tea. It's just audit season. The budgets have been messier than usual lately. You're not good at lying, Dad, she smiled. Remember when you tried to hide that new speaker system from Mom and she figured it out just because you blinked more than normal? I chuckled weakly, but truthfully, I didn't know where to begin. How could I tell my daughter, a lawyer who still believed in justice and the integrity of the law, that her father was working inside a machine that had rotted from the core, that each morning I wasn't sure if I'd walk out the front doors still a free man? That weekend, I drove out to the mountains near Asheville, to the small cabin my wife and I had once restored together. I needed space to think, but even in that stillness, I could still hear the voices of Jacob, of Martha, and my own from those late-night recordings. If it all collapses, no one's coming to save us but us. I looked at the flashing light of the hard drive plugged into my laptop. Hundreds of files, financial reports, internal emails, timesheets, transaction logs. I had pieced together half the puzzle, but if I wanted to bring it all to light, I needed more people, more truth, and time was running out. The next morning at the cabin, I got up early, made myself a cup of black coffee, and sat by the window as the fog still clung to the surface of the lake. What I had in my possession wasn't just scattered leads. It was a nearly complete picture of a fraud system that had been built deliberately, cleverly, and cruelly. I opened my laptop and accessed the final encrypted folder, Ironwell. Inside was everything: altered financial records, suspicious payment logs, details of questionable consulting contracts, phantom inventory data, copies of emails between senior executives that blatantly bypassed internal audit procedures. I had even recorded a few off-the-record conversations between Lisa and Darren using a small pen recorder sewn into my suit jacket pocket. I needed someone who could turn this evidence into a legal hammer, and I knew exactly one man for the job: Noah Whitaker. Noah was a college friend, now a federal prosecutor specializing in financial crimes, out of Atlanta. Back then, he was the type who would sue a professor over an unfair grade. We hadn't spoken in over 8 years, but I still had his number saved, with a note: "Only call if absolutely necessary." I dialed. 1 ring. 2. Then that familiar voice came through. "Whitaker." I lowered my voice. "Grayson Hale, Eastwell Industries. I have something important. About financial fraud, large scale." There was silence on the line. Then, "How large?" "I have proof that millions of dollars have been siphoned out of the benefits fund. Evidence of cooked books to inflate valuation before a pending acquisition. Possible manipulation of government contracts. I can be at your cabin tonight." His tone shifted, instantly serious. I sent the address by text, then spent the rest of the afternoon sorting the evidence into groups: finance, HR, audit, operations. Each set was separately encrypted, backed up, and stored across 3 external hard drives. When Noah arrived, I didn't waste time with greetings. I handed him OneDrive and a 5-page summary I had written over the past 2 days. He read for nearly half an hour, no questions, no pauses. Finally, he leaned back, took off his glasses, and exhaled sharply. Grayson, if this checks out, it's a federal case that could land the executive board and several shareholders in prison. I don't care if they go to prison, I just want the truth exposed. And for the people who lost their money, especially the longtime employees, to be protected. Noah nodded. I'll take it to the DOJ and federal auditors, but I need more. Someone willing to testify, or someone still inside. I thought for a moment. Maybe Teresa. She had been my financial assistant before getting shuffled to another department not long after Darren showed up. Teresa was meticulous, principled, and most importantly, she knew how to pull data without leaving a trace. The next day, back in the city, I received an envelope from Eastwell's legal department. Inside was a separation agreement with a non-disclosure clause so aggressive it was almost laughable. If I signed, I'd receive 3 months' salary for nearly 2 decades of work. I handed it to Ellie. She skimmed through it, frowning. This clause isn't enforceable in several states. They're trying to scare you. They said if I don't sign, I could lose my unemployment benefits and unused vacation payout. Not legal, Ellie replied firmly. That's psychological pressure. I wouldn't sign. But I also knew that if I refused without safeguards, I'd become their first target for silencing. I needed a plan. How to move the evidence safely, how to protect potential witnesses, and most of all, how to force them out into the open before they cornered me. The next morning, I sent a blank email with a small encrypted file to the secure address Noah had given me. The subject line read only. 3rd floor, internal data room, Teresa can verify. 3 hours later, I received a message. Contacting now, are you sure she can be trusted? I stared at the screen and typed, she once told me, numbers don't lie. People do. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in my study, the laptop glowing in the darkness, its light reflecting off my eyes in the mirror. No more fear. Only readiness. What I was about to do would change everything, not just for me, but for the people who thought money could keep the truth buried forever. 3 days after sending the first round of evidence to Noah, my doorbell rang just before 6 p.m. Through the frosted glass, I saw the silhouette of a woman in a cream-colored coat holding a thick folder. Lisa. She stood there, trying to look calm, but her eyes betrayed urgency. I cracked the door open, just enough. Grayson, she said, her voice soft like we were old friends. I'm sorry to drop by unannounced. Can we talk for a few minutes? I think we've said enough, I replied, hand braced against the door. I came with a new offer, she said, raising the folder. The board agreed to add another 3 months severance, of course, only if you sign the NDA today. I stared straight at her. Why the rush? Lisa's smile tightened. We just want to ensure things end smoothly, avoid any unnecessary confusion. I gave a slow nod. I'll consider it. Then shut the door before she could speak another word. That same evening, a strange message lit up my phone. No name. No subject. Just 3 words, don't go far. I deleted it immediately, then activated the security camera system's event log. When I reviewed my personal bank access history, I saw 2 failed login attempts from an unfamiliar IP address. A password reset request had also been submitted from an old backup email, one I had only used once, 5 years ago. The next morning, I left the house early and stopped by the corner coffee shop I usually visited on Sundays. As I paid, Marvin, the owner, looked uneasy. Hey Grayson, someone was here yesterday asking about you, wanted to know when you usually come in, where you sit. I thanked him and walked quickly to my car. As I started the engine, I glanced in the rearview mirror. A black SUV with no front plates was parked across the street, motionless. That night, I told Noah everything in an 11-minute call. You're sending a message, he said, voice like steel. But this isn't just a bluff. If they're breaking the law this openly, it means they're scared. I asked him what he needed next. We need confirmation from inside. Your material is strong, but their lawyers will claim it's old management already resolved. If someone can verify that it's still happening now, it's a different case entirely. I ended the call and sat in the living room, staring into the dim streetlight glow flickering through the window like a pulsing alarm in my mind. Near midnight, I heard an engine start outside. None of the neighbors had a vehicle like that. I stepped out to the porch. The motion sensor light clicked on, but all I caught was the tail light of a car turning out of the neighborhood. The next morning, my office window was slightly cracked, just enough to suggest someone had been watching. I called Ellie. "Are you sure this isn't just coincidence?" "It's all happening at once," I answered. "Where do you see coincidence?" She paused. "Then you need legal protection. I'll contact one of my colleagues who specializes in privacy law. No one has the right to threaten you." "Listen," I said, trying to stay calm. "If something happens to me, all the files I've collected are backed up and dispersed. One's in a bank safe, under another name. One's in a location Lisa couldn't touch, even if she tried." Ellie held her breath. "You're playing a dangerous game, Dad. I don't have a choice." The next morning, I decided to call Teresa. She had been reassigned to training 6 months ago for no clear reason. I sent a short message. "If you still care about the truth, I need to meet. Urgent." She replied 2 hours later. "We need to talk, but not in the city. I'll send a location." The address was an old gas station about 12 miles from the nearest neighborhood. When I arrived, Teresa was already in her car, sunglasses on, hat pulled low. She stepped out holding a folder. "They're rewriting history, Grayson," she said quickly. "I still have internal access through your old credentials. Everything's being altered at the source. They call it data optimization, but it's just erasing the evidence." I looked at the folder. "Do you have before and after comparisons?" She nodded. "I saved each edit. And I'm not the only one. A few others are starting to notice. But they're quiet, scared." I exhaled, feeling for the first time in days that I wasn't alone anymore. Teresa glanced around, then whispered, "If they find out I'm talking to you, I'll be the next to disappear." I gripped the file bag, locking eyes with her. "Then let the truth speak before that happens." The folder Teresa handed me wasn't just a stack of papers. It was a ticking bomb wrapped in tape and fear. We sat in her car, where dim lights from the old gas station flickered across both our anxious faces. "I used your old login to access the system," Teresa began, her voice barely above a whisper. "Oddly, they haven't deactivated it. Maybe they think you're done, no longer a threat, but I know they didn't delete it because they're afraid someone might ask why." I opened my laptop, plugged in the USB she gave me. Folders appeared. Internal contracts, data edits, hidden payroll, retirement fund. Each item timestamped, with before and after comparisons, listing who made the changes and from which device. "This is the original financial data from last year," Teresa said, pointing to an open file. "They inflated total asset value by nearly 15% by adding new manufacturing equipment. That doesn't exist. The goal was to boost the company's valuation before selling the production division." I looked up, staring hard at her. "They're selling the production division?" "Yes, to a private group out of Dallas. But it hasn't been disclosed yet. The worst part? They plan to transfer the entire pension fund into a replacement fund before the sale goes through." I froze. If they drain the fund before announcing the sale, every worker on the floor will be left with nothing to claim. I wiped my face, feeling like my blood was moving in reverse. How many people know about this? Very few. I only found out by accidentally reading an email chain between Lisa and Darren. But there's someone else who had suspicions. Drew. Remember him? I remembered clearly. Drew was the head of quality control. He once brought me a report questioning new parts from a replacement vendor. He asked if I saw anything wrong in the test samples. I told him to stay quiet and send more reports. 3 weeks later, he vanished. "I tried calling him," Teresa said. No answer. His company email was shut down. What's disturbing is in the internal system, his HR file shows he voluntarily resigned. But there's no termination paperwork, no offboarding date. I stared at her. And his desk. Cleared out overnight. No one saw who took anything. Chill ran through me. We weren't just dealing with financial fraud anymore. This was an organization skilled in covering tracks and willing to erase anyone who became a threat. I need to back up everything, I said, and I need to get a copy to Noah tonight. Teresa hesitated. Do you trust Noah? I trust him enough to know he won't let this die in the dark. Before leaving, she grabbed my arm. Grayson, I'm not doing this to be a hero. I'm doing it because I can't keep watching everything get twisted. If this gets out, I'll lose my job. But if it doesn't, I'll lose myself. I nodded. You won't stand alone, I promise. That night, I sent the entire data package to Noah through a secure channel he provided. Within an hour, he called back. Grayson, he said quickly, this changes everything. The pension fund alone could escalate this to a federal case if we can prove intent to misappropriate. I think it's more than that, I replied. If Teresa's right, this is a plan to legally rob hundreds of families blind. We need to act fast, very fast. I hung up and sat silently in my dark room, the only light coming from my screen. Outside the window, the street was quiet, but I no longer felt safe. After leaving the gas station where I met Teresa, I didn't head home. Instead, I drove nearly 3 hours north to Asheville, where Ellie had gone to college. In a tiny cafe tucked into a hidden alley, I sat in the back corner, ordered a bitter espresso, and plugged the hard drive into my laptop. I made 3 new backups from the master data set. One I sent to Ellie with a message. If something happens to Dad, open the folder Echo 19, the password's in the leather wallet I gave you. The second went into a safety deposit box at Highlands Trust Bank, under an alias I registered 4 months ago, only accessible by federal court order. The third I encrypted and sent to Noah through a secure line, with the note, more witnesses incoming, prepare the next move. Late that evening, I contacted Greg Vossel, former head of procurement, who was let go 2 weeks after discovering a string of questionable invoices. We met at an abandoned truck stop near Hendersonville, where the cell signal was so weak you couldn't even call for an Uber. Greg looked older, more silver in his hair and a deeper voice, but his eyes were still sharp, just like when we used to debrief every Monday morning. I thought you'd forgotten, Greg said, handing me a thick envelope. Impossible, I replied, opening it to find complete printouts of archived inventory distribution logs, forged signatures, altered order dates, and especially incoming parts that had never passed quality inspection. I tried to keep everything, Greg said, but one night, my office computer vanished. No camera footage. Days later, I got a call from HR saying I no longer aligned with the new direction. My email was wiped before I could send a thing. I nodded, clutching the folder. I need 2 more people like you. Greg paused. I think I've got them. Lisa Jenkins from the old accounting team and an IT guy named Cooper. Both of them asked about miscellaneous charges they couldn't explain. I'll try to reach them. We parted in silence, but our final handshake was firm, like an unspoken vow. Later that night, while reviewing my home security systems, my phone rang. Unknown number. I hesitated for a few seconds before answering. Grayson, the voice was raspy and exhausted. Drew? It's me. I don't have much time. This is a burner. I can only say this once. I rushed to the garage, shut the door, and sat in the car with the noise-canceling feature activated. Where are you? Can't say, just listen. Eastwell's new supplier, Axis Components, is making defective control units. I ran thermal tests. Temperature exceeds safe levels in under 10 minutes. And they're being used where? In the military's armored vehicle contracts. I went cold. Grayson, if they keep installing that stuff in military vehicles, people are going to die. This isn't about money anymore. It's about lives. You have proof. I took screenshots of the test results and emails between Lisa and Axis. But then my access got revoked. A week later, I got a termination letter I never signed. That same night, someone tampered with my front door. I've been gone since. I clenched the steering wheel. Do you still have anything? I mailed a copy of the data to your old forecasting office address. It'll arrive in 2 days. If I disappear, you'll know what to do. The call ended abruptly. I sat in the car for 10 more minutes, numb. In my head, everything started to piece together into something terrifying. Financial fraud, pension fund siphoning, data manipulation, and now defective parts in military hardware. I opened my laptop, pulled up the draft email to Noah, and added one last line: possible major violation of defense contracts. Risk of fatal consequences. Immediate coordination with DoD required. I could feel it. Every boundary Eastwell had crossed so far was only the beginning, and I no longer had the option to turn back. I couldn't sleep the night before the sting operation. It felt like standing at the edge of a cliff. Everything I had lived up to behind me and the unknown yawning in front. That morning, I wore the pale gray shirt my wife once loved, buttoning it slowly, then tied a black tie like I was preparing for a funeral, but not mine. I drove to the Fairmont Hotel, a quiet building on the edge of Lake Carolina, where Noah and I had already set everything in place. The fourth floor was booked under a false name. 2 private conference rooms, cameras hidden in every corner, and a live feed to the federal office. Lisa confirmed she'd arrive at 9 a.m., bringing her lawyer and the final revision of the agreement. She had no idea the briefcase I carried didn't contain documents, but a remote-activated recorder linked to the agents waiting downstairs. At exactly 9:10 a.m., she entered the Magnolia meeting room, makeup flawless, confidence radiating from every step. Behind her was her attorney, a man with graying hair and a steady, guarded presence. "I hope we can wrap this up amicably," Lisa said, placing the folder on the table, her first smile barely masking her nerves. I didn't respond immediately. I flipped open the file, skimmed the familiar lines, and paused at Clause 9. The absolute confidentiality clause covering all information related to Eastwell, past and present. "All the paperwork is here," her lawyer spoke up. "Just sign here and you'll receive 5 months severance plus payout for any unused vacation. A generous offer for a departing employee." I set the pen down, but didn't sign. "Before I sign, I'd like to ask a few small questions, just to avoid misunderstandings later." Lisa tilted her head, her smile stiffening. "Of course. This agreement includes the employee pension fund, correct? And those temporary fund transfers last quarter?" She nodded, her tone steady. "All company assets are covered." "And what about the Department of Defense parts supply contract?" At that, her attorney gently tugged on her sleeve. Her face paled. "Grayson, I don't understand what you're implying." I looked up, meeting her eyes. "I'm not implying anything. I'm stating this clearly. The clauses in this agreement won't stop me from doing what's right, especially since I've already submitted full evidence of falsified financial records, embezzlement, and the use of substandard components in military vehicles to the Department of Justice and the Department of Defense." Right then, the door behind her swung open. 3 federal agents and 2 investigators from the Department of Defense entered swiftly without a word. The lead agent produced a search warrant and held it up to Lisa and her lawyer. "Lisa Raymond, you are under arrest for suspected financial fraud, conspiracy to defraud the federal government, and serious violations of defense contract regulations." She froze, lips trembling. "What? What is this? You have no right." "We have a warrant from the Eastern District Court of North Carolina, and this is only the beginning." At the same time, 2 other teams of agents entered Eastwell's headquarters less than 10 minutes away. Damon Ellis was arrested in his office, while CEO Mark Preston was stopped at the airport as he was about to board a flight to Houston. I stayed seated, not taking my eyes off Lisa as she was handcuffed and led out. She turned back to look at me, eyes full of hatred and disbelief, as if she couldn't grasp how the man she thought had been cast aside was the one who overturned the entire game. Noah stepped into the room a few minutes later, nodded at me, and placed a thick folder on the table. Testimonies from Teresa, Greg, and Cooper, plus the files from Drew and our data verification analysis. The case has officially been moved to federal prosecution. I stood, removed the recorder pen from my jacket pocket, and handed it to him. "This was my part. The rest is up to you." Noah shook my hand. "You just saved more people than you realized, Grayson." I walked out of the Magnolia meeting room, not exactly lighthearted, but at peace. In the elevator heading down to the first floor, I didn't look at my reflection. I didn't need to. 6 months after the raid at the Fairmont Hotel, The old Eastwell Industries campus still had its stained concrete walls and rusted steel fences, but everything inside had changed. The corporate nameplate reading Eastwell Global was gone. In its place stood a new brass plaque, Hailstone Manufacturing Cooperative, a name employees voted on themselves, honoring the natural stone ridge outside the plant, once seen as a symbol of durability. The federal court had ruled, after Eastwell's assets were frozen and split, the manufacturing division was officially purchased by a coalition of 47 core employees, with support from the North Carolina Industrial Development Fund. What moved me most wasn't the ruling, it was seeing Greg, Teresa, and even Cooper listed as founding members of the new company. They invited me back as interim CEO, but I declined, not because I wasn't capable, but because I believed the next generation should be the ones to steer this ship. "I'll help you rebuild the foundation," I said during the first meeting on the assembly floor. "But don't expect me to sit behind a glass desk. I'll be in the background, where the numbers must be as honest and clear as daylight." It took me over 2 months to redesign Hailstone's financial control system, a 3-step approval protocol, quarterly independent audits, an internal whistleblower hotline, and one core principle: no expenditure over the approved limit without a public justification. Ellie played a big role in the recovery process, too. She represented a team of attorneys working directly with audit authorities to restructure the pension fund. After dozens of negotiations, we managed to recover nearly 70% of the money that had been stolen. It wasn't enough to undo every loss, but it was enough to keep most older employees from losing their homes. Drew, though still living off the grid in the Western Mountains, submitted a video testimony to the Department of Defense. The investigation into the military contract is ongoing, but at the very least, all defective parts were recalled before being installed in any military vehicles. Lisa, Damon, and Preston are all awaiting trial. Several lower-level executives have pleaded guilty and are cooperating for reduced sentences. The Eastwell scandal has been described by the media as one of the most severe internal corporate frauds on the East Coast in the last decade. But what matters most to me is what happened next: rebirth. Once a week, I visit Hailstone in the early morning before the lines start running to sit in a plastic chair near the inspection zone. No one needs to greet me. I don't need to give orders. I just sit and watch, quiet, content. Last week, Kyle, the security guard who once escorted me out, approached as I was checking the order tracking system. "Mr. Grayson," he said sincerely, "I never thought I'd see this day, but now everyone here understands why the numbers need to be right." I smiled, then returned to reviewing the weekly report. Line by line, the data appeared. Clean, orderly, not a single number forgotten. As for me, after finishing my work at Hailstone, I accepted a part-time advisory role with the Southeastern Manufacturing Association. The job didn't bring prestige, but it gave me a chance to visit small factories and talk with owners about financial ethics, about building a culture of transparency from the ground up. In the evenings, I returned to my house on the edge of town, where a framed photo of my wife still smiled beneath the apple tree on my desk. Sometimes, I'd open the old leather briefcase that had followed me for nearly 20 years. It no longer carried secret files, just a few notebooks, a fountain pen, and a teaching outline I'd written for upcoming ethics workshops. Grayson Hale, age 60, was no longer the gatekeeper thrown out of the system. I was the one who survived the storm, and more importantly, the one who saw the truth rise again. Not in glory, not with applause, but just enough to know, when protected the right way, some numbers can save an entire community. Grayson Hale's story is proof that integrity never goes out of style, even in a corporate world dominated by greed and power. Though pushed out after nearly 20 years of service, he chose not to stay silent. Instead, he gathered evidence and tirelessly brought the truth to light. His actions didn't just expose crimes, they helped save hundreds of families from financial ruin. Grayson didn't become a hero, he became a guardian of professional ethics in a time of chaos. What do you think about Grayson's courageous journey and his choice to speak out against wrongdoing? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to follow the channel for more powerful stories about life, family, and integrity.